Hello everyone, my name is Chris and welcome to my Fallout New Vegas Beginner's Guide. This guide, unlike my best start guide, will aim to explain the many mechanics and subjects of Fallout New Vegas without giving spoilers to the game's story or quests. There will be mentions of specific items, weapons, factions, etc. However, I will not be giving any spoilers to the game's story and any side quests within the game. This guide should give players an idea of what each section of Fallout New Vegas affects or does. Some of the gameplay might look different to those playing on vanilla, but the mechanics will stay the same. I do play with mods which affect some things, however each category will apply regardless of this. If you are looking for a best start guide and are already familiar with Fallout New Vegas, then I have a best start guide which you can watch here. As always, there are timestamps in the description if you wish to skip to a particular section, but without further ado, let's get into the video. First up, we have character customization. Once you wake up in Doc Mitchell's house, you will have the chance to edit the appearance of your character. You will be able to choose a name for your character as well as choose things such as gender, race, as well as edit the physical traits of your character.
But you'd better tell me if I left anything out of place. How'd I do?
You can also edit hair and eye colour. Please note that the customization and name has no impact on the game itself and is primarily for the player only. Next up, we have the special skills. After waking up in Doc Mitchell's house, the player will need to distribute 5 points between 7 special stats. The player starts off with 5 in every stat, and it is completely up to you how you wish to distribute the points. You can even lower other stats to put points into others. Each stat cannot go lower than 1 and cannot go higher than 10. If you receive any bonuses that could result in the stat going over or under these numbers, they are simply ignored. Each stat affects different skills, granting a buff the more points you put into the special stat. Additionally, depending on how high your stat is, different stats enable you to choose certain dialogue options or complete certain actions to either complete a task or a quest more easily to perform a certain action. This will give the player more information for a task further along or finish a quest with a more favourable outcome. The strength stat affects how much you can carry before becoming over encumbered, as well as a slightly increase in the melee weapon skill. The melee weapon skill is buffed by +1 for every 2 points the player has into strength. Additionally, the carry weight of the player is increased by 10 pounds for every point the player has into strength. The perception stat affects the distance upon which players can detect NPCs on their compass. The higher the perception, the further away the player is able to detect NPCs. Additionally, the explosives, lockpick and energy weapon skills are buffed as well. The skills are buffed by +2 for every point the player has into perception. The endurance stat affects the player's environmental resistances such as poison and radiation resistance. Additionally, it also buffs the player's hit points as well as the healing rate of the player. The endurance skill also affects how many implants the player can acquire in their body. The higher the endurance, the more implants you can receive. And finally, endurance buffs at the unarmed and survival skills. The skills are buffed by +2 for every point the player has into endurance. The resistances are buffed a little more for every point into endurance. The player's poison resistance is buffed by 5% per point, and the player's radiation resistance is being buffed by 2% per point. And finally, the player's starting health bar value or hit points is increased by 20 points per point into endurance, with an endurance of 1 giving the player a starting value of 120 and an endurance of 10 giving the player a starting value of 300. The charisma stat affects companion nerve as well as slightly increases the player's barter and speech skills. Companion nerve grants 5% to a companion's armor rating and damage output per point into charisma. Additionally, the player's barter and speech skills are increased by 2 points per point into charisma. The intelligence stat affects the player's skill rate as well as slightly increasing the player's medicine, repair and science skills. Upon a level up, the player has a base amount of 10 points to put into skills, and the intelligence stat adds an additional amount to this. For every point the player has into intelligence, the skill rate is increased by half a point. Additionally, the skills mentioned above are increased by 2 points per point into intelligence. The agility stat affects the player's action points, draw and holster speed, reload speed, as well as slightly increasing the player's guns and sneak skill. The game uses a formula to work out the reload speed modifier and then uses that value to calculate the reload time in seconds. Although it may seem complicated, essentially all it means is if your agility is below 5, then the reload speed becomes slower by 10% per point below 5 and vice versa if it's above 5. The game also uses a smaller formula to work out the player's base action point value. Starting at 65, the game then takes the agility value, multiplies it by 3 and adds it to the base value. Essentially, for every point you put into agility, your action points are increased by 3 each time. And finally, agility increases the player's guns and sneak skill by 2 points for every point they have into agility. The final special stat is luck. The luck stat affects the outcome of gambling, critical chance, and increases all stats by a small amount depending on the value of the stat. Luck will begin to affect gambling games such as slots and roulette when it hits at least 6, and will affect blackjack when it hits at least 7. Your critical chance of any weapon that can perform a critical hit will be increased by 1% for every point into luck. And finally, the luck stat will increase all skills by +2 for every 2 points they have into luck.
Look at that. Maybe them bullets done your brain some good.
Next up are tag skills. Once you have allocated your special stat points, you will have the option to tag 3 skills. All these do is boost the tag skill by 15 points. You can choose any 3 that you like, however depending on what skills you tag will determine your starting equipment when you leave the house. Out of all the weapon skills, if you tag the gun skill, you will be given a 9mm pistol and 43 rounds of ammunition. If you tag the energy weapon skill, you will be given a laser pistol and 20 rounds of ammo. Tagging the explosive skill will give you 8 sticks of dynamite. Tagging the melee weapon skill will give you a straight razor. And finally, tagging the unarmed skill will give you a set of boxing gloves. Additionally, if you have tagged the lockpick skill, you will be given 12 bobby pins instead of the standard 6. If none of these are chosen, you will either be given a 9mm pistol or a hand-to-hand weapon by default. Additionally, you will be given 6 bobby pins and 4 stim packs. Next up are traits. After allocating your points between your special stats and your tag skills, you will have the option to choose 1, 2 or no traits. Traits are somewhat like a perk when taken, which modifies an aspect of gameplay, granting a benefit in a certain area at the cost of another. The only exception is the Wild Wasteland trait, which should be called the Easter Egg trait. Wild Wasteland allows the player to experience various NPCs, items and Easter egg references. However, the trait is also the only way the player can acquire the Alien Blaster pistol. If they do not choose the Wild Wasteland trait, it will become unobtainable. If you wish to see every event that Wild Wasteland adds to the game, I have a video on that which you can watch here. Next up is Hardcore mode. Before leaving Doc Mitchell's house, you will be asked if you wish to play on Hardcore mode. If you are a new player and it is your first time playing through the game, it is advised that you do not play on Hardcore first. Hardcore mode essentially modifies or adds mechanics to the game, making it more difficult to play, however it is also more realistic. Aid items that heal a player instantly will now heal over time, and only certain items such as doctor's bags, Hydra or an auto doc can heal the crippled limb. Ammo will now have weight to them, companions can now die, and players will also need to monitor their hunger, thirst and fatigue. If either of these stats become too low, the player will die. Additionally, for every 200 points the player accumulates for either of these stats, they will be given a status effect lowering certain special stats. Next up is the heads-up display. After receiving your Pip-Boy and heading out of Doc Mitchell's house, you will have your interface displayed on screen. In the bottom right will be your AP bar, and underneath that will be your current equipped weapons condition as well as the ammo count. In the bottom left will be your health bar, and underneath that will be the compass to see which direction you're facing, as well as being able to see markers for quests and blips for NPCs as well as locations. Next up is the Pip-Boy interface. To bring up the Pip-Boy, press B, circle or tab if you're playing on PC, which will see various menu options. The 3 menus of the Pip-Boy separate different data and objects. The stats menu encompasses your status, which displays information about the player, including the health or condition of your limbs, the current radiation level of your player, any active effects currently affecting the player, both positive and negative, and if you're playing on hardcore mode, it will also display your current thirst, hunger and sleep values. The stats also include a special tab which allows you to see the current value of all your special stats. It also includes a skills tab which allows you to see the current value of all your skills. There is a perk tab which lists and keeps track of every perk you acquired in your playthrough from any means you have acquired them. And finally, it includes a general tab which displays and keeps track of your current reputation with any faction you have met, which we will get onto later. The items menu encompasses basically every type of item you can acquire, including a weapons tab to keep track and view every weapon you're currently carrying, which you can also hover over to view the information about the weapon. An armor tab to keep track and view every armor or clothing piece you're currently carrying, which you can also hover over to view the information about the piece. An aid tab to keep track and view every aid item and chem you're currently carrying, which you can also hover over to view the information about the item. A miscellaneous tab to keep track and view every misc or scrap item you're currently carrying, including quest items that you cannot remove from your inventory. And finally, an ammo tab to keep track and view every ammo type you're currently carrying. This menu is also used to swap between different ammo types that the weapon can use. The data menu encompasses your local map, which displays local map data based on where you currently are. the world map, which shows you the world you're in and all the locations you have either discovered or have marked on your map. The quest tab, which keeps track of every quest you currently have active, have finished or have failed. The miscellaneous tab, which keeps track of notes, data, holotapes and any other data you might come across. And finally the radio tab, which allows you to tune into several radio stations to listen to in the Mojave. Next up is Reputation. Reputation is a measurement of how each faction in the game views the player. Reputation is calculated by fame and infamy values. By doing good deeds such as helping members of that faction, completing quests, etc., you will increase your fame value. Inversely, killing members, going against their goals, or failing certain quests will cause infamy to go up. The game will take both values into consideration, which will result in the final reputation level. The benefits and drawbacks of reputation are different depending on the faction. For example, being idolised by one group may grant you discounts at their stores, where others will give you a key to their safe house with some very strong weapons and armour that you couldn't normally get until you're a higher level.
Great. This is gonna require an epic tale of heroism.
However, being vilified can make you fail quests instantly, not being able to continue with certain storylines, and some factions will even send assassins to hunt you down and kill you. Typically, the more militarized or violent the faction, the higher the chances of them being a lot more hostile or nicer to you, such as the NCR, Caesar's Legion and the Powder Gangers. The reputation system also affects quests, with some factions needing to be idolized in order to gain favor with them. Next up are items. We'll start off with weapons. Weapons in New Vegas are in one of 5 categories, that being guns, energy weapons, melee weapons, unarmed and explosives. If you're familiar with Fallout 3, you know there was a big gun skill, however in New Vegas it has been integrated with just the gun skill. All weapons in New Vegas have a damage output, damage per second, reload speed, critical hit chance, critical hit damage and weight. In addition to this, some weapons will have a skill requirement as well as a strength requirement. The skill requirement is needed in order to use the weapon. For example, the brush gun has a guns requirement of 100, meaning you need 100 into that skill in order to use the weapon. The strength requirement is beneficial but not necessary to reach. If the player is under the strength requirement, then it will be a lot less accurate with the weapon. For example, the brush gun has a strength requirement of 6 in order to use properly. You can also repair weapons to keep the condition up by acquiring several of the same weapon. Enter the repair menu in the Pip-Boy and you can use other weapons to repair the one you have equipped. However, you can only repair your weapon so much based on your repair skill. If you have the jury rigging perk you can get at level 14, you can repair items with other similar items as they will no longer need to be the exact weapon. Finally, every weapon has a weapon condition which can affect the damage of the weapon you use. Weapons degrade at a rate of 0.2 per shot of the weapon and based on a weapon skill of 100. If the weapon is under 75%, then the damage of the weapon will be half of what it normally is. To add on to the weapons category, most weapons will allow you to install mods onto them to benefit the weapon in some way. You will need to purchase these from vendors and have the weapon in your inventory to install it. Once you've installed a mod onto the weapon, however, it cannot be uninstalled. Any unique weapons cannot be equipped with mods, despite them being the same type that the mod would normally install on. The only exceptions to this is the weathered 10mm pistol from the Classic Pack DLC, the Mercenary Grenade Launcher from the Mercenary Pack DLC, Elijah's Advanced Layer from the Old World Blues DLC, and the Hollow Rifle from the Dead Money DLC. Mods include silencers, extended mags, scopes, recyclers, tube extenders, and the list goes on. Next up is ammo type. Unlike the previous installment, New Vegas allows you to use and change out different ammunition types to use with your weapons. These ammo types normally come with the benefit of either a higher damage output or being able to deal more damage to certain targets, but also normally come at a cost of a higher weapon degradation. Some of these ammo types include dealing more damage against armoured targets, dealing incendiary damage, slug rounds for a decreased weapon spread, high explosive rounds for a bigger area of effect damage, and the list continues. There are a load of ammo types for every weapon category that use ammo and can be used in various circumstances when in combat. Next up is armor. Armor in New Vegas are within 3 different weight classes, being light, medium and heavy. Furthermore, armor in New Vegas has a damage threshold, weight, condition, effect and faction affiliation. The damage threshold indicates the amount of damage the armor can absorb before the player loses hit points. Certain armors can give the player temporary effects, usually with buffing a skill or special stat as long as they're wearing the armor. The condition of the armor degrades if the player is dealt damage and the armor absorbs the damage. Depending on the condition of the armor can potentially protect the player fully at 50% or above condition, but can drop to protecting only 2/3 of the damage at below 50%. Some armor is also affiliated with certain factions and can be used to disguise the player as a member of that faction. This can be used to temporarily increase your reputation with that faction, but can also make you enemies with that faction rivals if you walk past them disguised. Next up are consumables. These are items the player can use via the aid tab to provide a wide variety of effects depending on the item consumed. The first category is food. These types of items are affected by the survival skill. The higher the skill, the more effective the items will be. Unlike the previous installment, a lot of Fallout New Vegas' healing items heal the player over a certain period and do not heal instantaneously. Most food items will heal the player anywhere from 2 to 20 seconds. Most food items also come at the cost of slightly irradiating the player upon consumption. More unique or rarer items offer more effects upon consumption, such as increasing or lowering special stats, skills, or AP. If you're playing on hardcore mode, this item will also decrease your hunger and thirst depending on what you consume. The next category is drinks. There are various drink types in Fallout New Vegas, with most acting like they do in the real world. Drinks such as soft drinks or bottle drinks like water and Nuka-Cola, and also Sunset Sarsaparilla, which will heal the player for a certain amount of time and are used primarily as a healing item. You also have alcohol in the game, which primarily affects the player's special stats, increasing the more social stats at the cost of intelligence and the increasing chance of developing addiction. However, you also have more niche drinks such as atomic cocktails or DLC drinks such as Battle Brew, which will provide more powerful bonuses as the healing limb damage and granting resistances to certain types of damage become more common. The final category of consumables are chems. Chems can act as a healing item or granting a buff to the player, normally at the cost of potential addiction to the chem. You will most commonly use stim packs to heal throughout the game when not consuming food or drinks. Stim packs have no cost to using them and simply heal the player a certain amount depending on their medicine skill. Chems like Jet, Mentats, Buff Out and Psycho however grant different effects. From allowing you to deal more damage to increasing your special stats, these buffs are temporary, usually lasting a minute or two, but they also can be stacked. Every time you use a chem, you run the risk of getting addicted, which you will either need to use chems such as Fixer or go pay a doctor to remove your addiction. Adding on to the subject of chems, throughout the Mojave you will find many addictive consumables which will have different rates of addiction. Becoming addicted lowers your special stats depending on the chem you're addicted to. The only special stat that is not affected is luck. Next up are perks. Perks are obtained either through leveling up, completing quests a certain way, or completing challenges such as the Meet of Champions. The most common way you will acquire perks is via leveling up. You will be able to choose a perk every 2 levels, and depending on your skill and special stats will be able to choose certain perks, as most of them have some requirement for taking them. Next up are skills. Skills are a set of 13 different skill categories with combat and non-combat skills. Combat skills, which are guns, energy weapons, melee weapons, explosives and unarmed, affect, as you might have guessed, how much damage the player does with those weapons. Additionally, having a lower melee weapon skill than the weapon requires will make your attacks with the weapon slower. The non-combat skills, which are barter, medicine, lockpick, repair, science, speech, sneak and survival, affect things such as buying and selling prices, dialogue checks, how much you can repair your weapons, how well aid items work, etc. They are primarily gameplay skills and affect the decisions you can make depending on their value. Next up is crafting. Crafting is used for building a large range of things, which means items have a lot more practical value than in previous installments. Crafting in Fallout New Vegas relies on the repair skill for crafting ammunition, science for custom weapons, and the survival skill for crafting food and drink. The first crafting object is the reloading bench. The reloading bench is used to craft ammunition and allows you to not only craft new ammo but break down other ammo types into their components to then use to craft other ammunition. Be aware that you won't get an exact conversion rate when breaking down ammunition, however you can also break down items such as scrap metal for the lead component. If you have the Dead Money DLC and have the junk rounds perk, you can make your own junk rounds which requires less rare components being scrap metal and tin cans. Next up is the workbench. The workbench is used to craft a large variety of items ranging from homemade weapons, explosives and items such as healing items and weapon repair kits. The workbench also works as a reloading bench but for energy weapons. The workbench allows you to use expended fuel tanks and microfusion cells and recycle them into fresh ammunition. Additionally, the workbench allows you to convert certain energy cells into others. The final crafting item is the campfire. The campfire is used to cook raw food but also allows you to craft a large variety of medicine, chems and poisons. The campfire also allows you to create makeshift armor from animal pieces such as their hide. The campfire recipes require you to have a certain amount of points into survival and or science to craft them. Next up is hacking. Hacking is a way of gaining access to locked terminals and is influenced by the science skill. Upon interacting with a locked terminal, the player will have a view of words that can potentially be the password. Upon picking a word, if the password is incorrect, the terminal will tell the player how many letters positions match with the actual password. The player also has 4 attempts to enter the correct password. Additionally, the player can remove some of these incorrect words by finding duds. Duds can be found by inputting ASCII symbols that are between sets of brackets, including curly braces, square braces, normal braces, and pointed braces. The amount of words appearing for you to have a guess through will be less the higher your science skill is. A low science skill will have a lot of words appear even at the lowest locked level, however a high skill of 100 will have fewer words, with some terminals not even having a failure rate. Furthermore, there is a chance that instead of removing an incorrect password, the terminal will replenish the amount of tries the player has to input the correct password. If you use up all your attempts and do not get the password correct, you will be locked out of the terminal and will not be able to access the system unless you have a password holotape for it. Despite this, if you take the Computer Whiz perk at level 18, any terminal you were locked out of becomes unlocked again, giving you another chance at hacking the terminal. If you do not want to run the risk of getting locked out on your final attempt, simply exit the terminal and re-enter it. The terminal will reset, giving you a brand new set of words to guess, however your attempts will go back up to the max amount. Next up is lockpicking. Lockpicking is, as you might have guessed, a way to open locked containers and doors and is influenced by the lockpick skill. Upon interacting with a locked object, the lockpicking menu will pop up. Locks are ordered from very easy, which requires a lockpick skill of 0, to very hard, which requires a skill of 100. Once in the menu, you will need to move the pick around to find a sweet spot to open the lock. Push the pick too far in the wrong position and it will break, and you will need to use another lockpick from your inventory. The player also has the option to try their luck and force the lock. This is a percentage that takes into consideration the lockpick difficulty and your own lockpick skill value. It gives you a percentage of chances of success if you were to force the lock. If it is successful, you will unlock the object without needing to play the minigame. However, if it fails, the lock will break and you will no longer be able to open the container unless you use a terminal connected to it or have a key. Additionally, if you take the Infiltrator perk at level 18, you will get one more attempt at lockpicking if you force the lock and it breaks. Next up is VATS. VATS, or Vault Tech Assisted Targeting System, returns in New Vegas and is used within combat when targeting an enemy. VATS freezes time and allows you to target 6 different limbs of an enemy at the cost of your action points. Each weapon has different action point costs depending on what weapon you use, and depending on the type of weapon as well as the distance you are away from the target, VATS will display the percentage chance of you landing a hit on that limb. Additionally, if the player has a melee weapons or unarmed skill of at least 50, they will unlock special attacks they can do in VATS to deal more damage but at the cost of more AP. Next up is currency. As with other installments, bottle caps will be your main source of currency for buying and selling items. However, New Vegas introduces 2 new currencies. These currencies include the NCR dollar and the Legion, Denarius and Aureus. Both currencies can be sold to any vendor for caps, however both are used primarily for converting those currencies to casino chips for gambling. You can convert the currencies to chips and then turn in the chips for caps, or just sell them outright to merchants. Next up is gambling. A new addition to Fallout is the prospect of gambling in casinos. There are 6 casinos you can gamble at and be banned from in the game when you win over a certain amount of chips. There are 3 games you can play in casinos, that being slots, roulette and blackjack. The luck skill heavily impacts the outcome of your gambling, with roulette and slots being manipulated with a luck of 6 and blackjack with a luck of 7. If one has a luck of 10, they can win most hands at blackjack with relative ease. This often results in being given hands of 20 or a blackjack, or being dealt a hand of 10 or 11 where you can double down, which often or not gives you a blackjack. Slots don't pay out too often, but with a high luck you are more likely to spin and win a jackpot. Despite this, however, if you wish to earn a consistent rate of chips, then you should be playing blackjack. If you wish to see a guide on how to become banned from every casino, then I have a guide on how to do so, which you can watch here. Next up are companions. There are 8 unique companions you can acquire in New Vegas, and every companion has their own questline which you can complete to upgrade them, either giving them better armor or a perk. You can have 2 followers at once, 1 humanoid and 1 non-humanoid. Once you have a companion in your party, they will also give you the unique companion perk for as long as they remain in your party. If you dismiss them or send them somewhere, then you will lose the perk. I have a full guide on every companion in the game, including their personal quests and upgrades, which you can watch here. Next up are snow globes. Snow globes replace their iconic bobbleheads in New Vegas and offer no benefit except being able to be sold to an individual for a lot of caps. There are 7 snow globes in the base game and 1 in each DLC which you can collect. If you wish to see where each snow globe is, I have a guide on that which you can watch here. The final category is DLC content. There are 4 major story DLCs that New Vegas has, and each are definitely worth playing. If this is your first time playing New Vegas, I would highly suggest you wait until you've leveled up a bit and familiarise yourself with New Vegas before jumping headfirst into one of the DLCs. In addition to some of them being difficult, 3 out of 4 of the DLCs that once started cannot be exited until you finish them, that being Dead Money, Honest Hearts and Old World Blues. Furthermore, when you tackle the DLCs again, if you haven't played them before, I would play them in the order of Honest Hearts, Old World Blues, Dead Money, and finally Lonesome Road. Not only does it make more sense lore-wise, but it follows a low to high level, with the recommended level of Honest Hearts being 10 and Lonesome Road being 25. Each DLC recommends a level that you should be before starting the DLC, however none of them restrict you from entering if you're at a lower level. And there we are guys, that is my beginner's guide into the world of Fallout New Vegas. I hope I shed some light on Fallout and that you found this guide helpful in some way. If I forgot anything, please let me know in the comments down below and I'll try and help where I can without spoiling anything. Again, I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, thank you for watching.